and the fact that you're gay. Since you don't want to tell everyone gathered here today who Mark is, I will. Mark is Stanley's boyfriend, but he's not really. Are you, Mark? This is Bedtime Stories, Grownup Edition, Poetic Justice, Part 12. When we left off, two branches of the Lopez family were preparing for dinner. At Angela's house, her children had already had dinner, and Mom Brenda was helping them prepare for bed, while their parents sat down for dinner with Sincere, Saint, and Catherine St. James. As soon as the meal concluded, Sincere said, "Q, Angela, I want to thank you for your hospitality and for providing a welcoming space, a safe space, for my brother and I to have a very difficult conversation." Saint looked up from his cup of liqueur and said, "What's up?" Sincere said, "At the round table meeting today, I discovered that our mother didn't just run away with the money that our father left her. She had help from Amira, and the two of them were working together to take out or take down numerous members of this family. Their plot cost Big Wood his life and almost cost you yours. As a result, every person who participated in that plot has been, is being, or will be dealt with, including our mother." Saint said, "Did you talk with her? Did you verify for yourself that she was involved in this plot?" Sincere said, "I didn't have to. I saw the text messages, I heard the voicemails, and I saw the pictures." Saint said, "Why would she do that?" Sincere said, "Because she was involved in a relationship with Amir. She wanted me on the throne of the St. James family, Catherine dead, and Amir in position as my right hand, doing her bidding as the matriarch." Saint said, "That couldn't have been her idea. That sounds like she was manipulated. Instead of sitting down for a cozy dinner, we should be going to talk with her. Do you know where she is?" Sincere said, "I know where she is. She's dead." Saint said, "You let them kill our mother?" Sincere said, "No, I killed our mother." Saint said, "What the hell? With your own two hands, you killed my mother?" Sincere said, "No, but I made the phone call, and it had to happen, one way or the other. I have a responsibility to you, to our sisters." Saint said, "Nigga, please. I don't want to hear that. You are sitting here telling me that you killed my mother in exchange for a seat at a table that you didn't even know about a few months ago?" Sincere said, "That has nothing to do with it." Saint said, "I know what it has something to do with. It has something to do with her." And he pointed at Catherine while saying, "She assigned you to kill all of Daddy's mistresses. I should have known that Mommy was going to be next. I should have known that she was going to find a way." Catherine said, "Boy, if I wanted to kill your mother, I could have. Lots and lots of times. I was willing to let her live. She knew that, and so did you." Saint said, "Let me guess. Catherine was on Mommy and Amir's list of victims." Sincere said, "Yes, she was." Saint said, "This wasn't about me. It wasn't about a plot against me. It was about Wood getting revenge for him and saving her." Sincere said, "That can't be any further from the truth, bro. You can't think that I wanted to do this." Saint said, "Well, if you didn't want to do it, you'd have found another way to deal with it. You the new kid on the block, so they got you out here proving yourself by offing your own family members. I guarantee you, they're not out here killing their own." Q said, "And that's where you're wrong. As we speak, the head of the Lopez family, the head of the 5 families, is holding a last supper for his own son. Internally, he's the mastermind of the extended plot, the portion of the plot that did cause Big Wood's death. And by this time tomorrow, his mother's going to be mourning him." Saint said, "Okay, I get it. Y'all all are some ruthless, heartless, disloyal bastards. But I'm out. I won't work for a family that killed my mother and my father. After long, I'll be next. And so will my sisters." Sincere said, "That's not what this is about." Angela said, "Please allow me to interject. When you all came in, you met our children. Our oldest daughter is the biological daughter of my first husband and my oldest sister. They are both deceased. My oldest sister, Jessica, tried to kill me. She also stole my newborn son. She lost her life during the effort to retrieve my son. And so did my first husband. I know something about family betrayal. I know what it's like to have somebody who you love, who you believe loves you, do the unimaginable. I know what it's like to have someone else's life in your hands and having to choose to end theirs, not only to save your own, but to save the lives of the people that you love. You want to tap out because you think that you and your sisters are going to be next? Let me tell you something. Had the 5 families not handled this situation as thoroughly and succinctly as we are, your life would not have been the only one out of your siblings to be in danger. The pastor that your sister Chantal is so enamored with is connected to the trafficking organization that capitalized on Amir and your mother's plot and inserted itself in the St. James organization by manipulating a member of the Charles organization. Your sisters are together right now, supporting Chantal as she learns about this. She was being groomed to be that pastor's next victim, to be the next victim of that trafficking organization, the very organization that my husband, your cousin, has been working diligently to take down for the past several years. That organization tried to touch my daughter, the older one that you met. You want to be outraged? I'm outraged. You want someone to blame for your mother's death? Blame your mother. And the whole room got quiet. Finally, Saint said, I just don't understand how my mother got involved in all of this. Why she would do any of this. I get why she might want to get revenge against Catherine, but I can't see why she would agree to all the rest of that. Why she would even want to manipulate Sincere. Angela said she was questioned before she was killed. I'll see if I can get you that video. Perhaps it'll provide you with some answers. Then she stepped out of the room to call the Queen Mother. As her guests continued talking, she heard the doorbell ring. And before she could go to answer it, Hugh did. When he opened the door, Samuel was standing on his doorstep. Samuel said, You've got some explaining to do, nephew. Meanwhile, at the Lopez estate, a very uncomfortable dinner was had. While Manny was talking to the Queen Mother shortly thereafter with Nadia, Marisol had given her daughter Miranda and her son Lorenzo the highlights of the situation that they were walking into. She summed it up by saying, Before I married your father, a woman came to me and told me that she was pregnant by him. The circumstances were rather complicated, and I was willing to support whatever decision she made. She was free to claim him if she so chose. She did not. It was in both her and your father's best interest to walk away, and she did. Miranda said, What? Marisol said, Miranda, I can only speak for my role in it. She made her decision. The next time I saw her, she was married with a son, whom she said was her husband's. Miranda asked, And you believed her? Marisol said, No, I didn't. But that was her story, and she was sticking with it. Her son is obviously a man now, but he is not a good one. He was the mastermind of the plot that the families are dealing with right now. He's the reason why True is in hiding, Wood is dead, and we're having this dinner. Lorenzo said, Where's Maribel? Marisol said she has a patient who may be having an emergency, but your father will speak with her and bring her up to speed. When everyone was seated around the dinner table, Stanley was brought in by 2 guards, and Miranda and Lorenzo were in shock. Stanley said, We missing a family member, ain't we? I guess that means that I'm going to get a do-over. Manny said, There won't be any do-overs. Maribel is not available, but I'll bring her up to speed. Stanley said, Then we might as well cancel this dinner, because I'm not talking unless I get to talk to all of my siblings. Manny said, No problem. Take him back to his hole. Stanley said, Wait, when are we going to have the dinner? Manny said, Right now. Stanley said, But I want to be able to say my piece. Manny said, You need to make up your mind, Stanley. It's now or never. Stanley said, Fine, and sat back down, realizing he was not going to be able to manipulate Emmanuel Lopez. Then Manny said, Before dinner begins, I want to go ahead and address the elephant in the room. You all know Nadia. When Miranda and Lorenzo said hello, Manny said, She was my first love. You all know Stanley. And Miranda and Lorenzo just stared at Stanley. And he said, You already know that he's Nadia and Anand's son. Biologically, he's Nadia and my son. Lorenzo said, So you're his father? Stanley said, I knew you was dumb, but I didn't know you was deaf too. Reading his lips, Nadia winced. Stanley said, everything is not about you being deaf, Nadia. And before Manny could check him, Lorenzo said, it looks like you're the only dumb person at this table. You're also probably the only person who either hasn't read or doesn't understand. Ephesians chapter 6, verses 2 and 3. Stanley said, oh, you're dumb and a Bible thumper. That's got to be a great combination. Manny looked at Lorenzo and said, you're right on both accounts, son. He's dumb, but it will not be long before he learns what the opposite of that promise looks like. Both Manny and Lorenzo were referring to the fact that honoring your mother and father was the only commandment of the 10 commandments that was attached to a promise, the promise of long life. And Manny said, and to answer your original question, no, I am not his father. Stanley said, what the hell? Manny continued saying, Anand is his father. Anand took care of his mother when she was pregnant, poured into him in his mother's womb, married her and was present when he took his first breath, signed his birth certificate, and gave him his last name, held him when he cried, taught him how to ride a bicycle, picked him up when he fell. He also put food in his belly, clothes on his back, and a roof over his head, taught him how to be a man, sent him to college, and prayed over his life. That's what fathers do for their sons. That's what I did for you. So no, I am not his father. Then Lorenzo looked at his mother and Nadia and asked, are you two okay? When they both nodded yes, he said, good. It's 6:59. When are we eating? Dinner was at 7 and not a minute later, or Lorenzo was going to be very unhappy. So Manny said, dinner will not be late, son. I'm your father. I fulfill your needs. And Stanley was pissed. Like clockwork, the staff started bringing in already prepared plates. When the server sat 4 separate plates in front of Lorenzo, Stanley laughed. Lorenzo did not like for his food to touch. When everyone was served, Manny looked up and said, oops, looks like we forgot one. And everyone looked at Stanley's place setting. There was not a plate in front of him. Manny turned to the last server walking out of the room and said, bring the last plate and tell Javier that we're ready. The server walked out, and shortly thereafter, a man walked in. And Stanley said, what the? As the man walked to the only empty seat at the table, Lorenzo was fuming. He said, in this family, we do not use profanity in front of women and children, and we certainly don't use it at the dinner table. I know your parents. They're good people. I know they raised you better than that. Don't use that language at this table again. Stanley said, nigga. And then the server walked in with the final plate. She sat it in front of the man who just arrived. And Stanley said, so you gonna starve me too? I'ma just sit here and watch y'all eat? Manny said, of course not. Then he nodded to the server. She walked back out and returned with a bowl of broth and a platter of oyster crackers. She sat them in front of Stanley, and Manny said, Stanley, do you want to introduce your guest? And Stanley said, go to hell. When Lorenzo went to get up, Manny stayed him with one hand. He looked at the server who was exiting the room and said, tell Javier to come in. When Javier came in, Manny said, Stanley's having a difficult time behaving appropriately at my dinner table. Do you mind having a talk with him? Then Javier snatched Stanley by the shirt, yanked him out of the chair, flipping the chair over, and dragged him across the floor and out of the dining room. Stanley was kicking and screaming, and Lorenzo was laughing hysterically. When Lorenzo looked up, Manny was staring at him. Lorenzo said, what? That wasn't funny? Then he looked around and realized nobody else was laughing. He said, I apologize, but I'm a little confused. What's the point of this dinner and who is he? Pointing at the man who joined them. And he said, Stanley wanted to have a dinner with my family. He thought he'd reveal his parentage, tell his story, embarrass me and his mother, incite you all's anger, and use that anger to manipulate me into saving his life. Miranda said, why would he think that that would work? Manny said, because he's bipolar, unmedicated and untreated. Miranda said, oh, I see. From the way that he's behaved, I'd say he probably also suffers from borderline personality disorder, because that runs in the family too. Lorenzo said, that's no excuse for the things he's done, though. I don't care whose son he is. He put his hands on the woman that I love. Her brother, my friend, is dead. All the people that I've ever loved, the people who love and respect me, have been hurt by the things that he's done. Little kids, people living with disabilities, innocent people have been seriously hurt by the trafficking organization that's behind all of the things that are going on right now. If he's connected to this, then it's off with his head. Manny said, my sentiments exactly, son. Lorenzo said, are we taking a vote? Does somebody need to make a motion? If so, I will. Manny tried his best not to laugh. He said, son, this is not a family meeting. This is dinner. He wanted to go low. I'm just taking it to hell. Lorenzo said, oh, okay. I simply want to ask you all that when he returns to this table, no matter what you hear, no matter what's said, don't ask any questions. I don't want to give him the satisfaction of learning anything that he didn't respect his parents enough to ask all of these years. I did not know that he was my son, but he knew I was his father. He made a willful choice to start a war within the 5 families instead of seeking understanding, instead of asking for what he needed. He will not get closure from me. When Mighty Soul looked at Manny, concerned that he was being a little too hard on Stanley, Manny said, I'm not upset with him. I'm not upset with anyone except for Anon. He and I need to have a conversation. I will not apologize for putting my family first, for putting the 5 families first. I have always done what was best for the greater good, and that will be clear to you all when dinner is done. When Javier brought back a beaten and bloodied Stanley, Nadia inhaled sharply and covered her mouth. The Queen Mother rested a hand on her shoulder, and Mighty Soul rested a hand on the other shoulder. Manny asked, are you ready to eat dinner now, Stanley? And Stanley just nodded his head. Manny said, then bow your head so that my son can bless the meal. Stanley said, this is how you treat your oldest son? Manny said, no. This is how I treat a traitor who has the audacity to request to eat a meal at my dinner table. Now close your mouth and bow your head. Then Lorenzo quickly blessed the food and dove in. Everyone had been served filet mignon, cooked to perfection, lobster tails, risotto, and fresh seasonal vegetables from the Lopez garden. As they dug in, Manny said, I still forgot to introduce our guests. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Mark Goodwin. Mark, this is my family. Then he looked at Stanley and said, Stanley, you want to tell everyone how you know Mark? Stanley said through labored breath, you win. I just wanted a chance to meet my siblings and explain my position. But you've turned this into a game that I can't win. Manny said, really? I guess I must have misunderstood. I thought that you wanted an opportunity to tell my children and my wife that I knocked your mother up when she was 17 years old and abandoned her, forcing her to pawn you off as a non-son. That Anon had no clue that he wasn't your father. Not until you used the knowledge that you'd obtained by being sneaky and underhanded. Force him and your mother to agree to allow you to succeed your Uncle Idra as the head of the Charles family so that you could conspire with the International Trafficking Organization and get revenge against those who you believed kept you from your destiny, and so that you could cover up the crimes you'd committed against women. Oh, and the fact that you're gay. My bad. Since you don't want to tell everyone gathered here today who Mark is, I will. Mark is Stanley's boyfriend, but he's not really. Are you, Mark? When Mark didn't respond, Manny said, Mark was blackmailed by the same International Trafficking Organization. His job was to pursue a relationship with Stanley. He recorded them involved in intimate acts, provided that recording to his handler, and that's what they actually used to scare him into compliance. Stanley could have done what Mark did. Stanley could have jumped out of the closet, confessed all to his Uncle Idra, completely taken the winds out of their sails, and helped us destroy them. But instead, he chose to work with them, to seek revenge on all of his enemies, both real and imagined. Isn't that right, Stanley? After a long pause, Manny said, just so you know, Mark is not in love with you. Mark saw on the news that the phlebotomist that you had him pass that cell phone to was found dead this morning, and he was afraid that he would be next. He called your right-hand man, and LJ answered the phone. He could have hung up. He could have pretended to be anybody else, but he didn't. He begged for help, and LJ obliged. And now, we don't need you. And then Stanley started begging for his life. Before he could even take a sip of his broth, Javier and several soldiers came back to the room and removed Stanley for good. After Mark finished his meal, Manny thanked him for joining them, and Javier came and escorted him out of the room. Then the Queen Mother asked, has everything that Mark gave up been verified? And Manny said, every single word. Now, I hate to leave you all, but I need to gather my thoughts and meet some additional guests who will be arriving shortly. When you all are done here, please join me in the drawing room. It's time that all of the secrets be revealed.